Today, an existential crisis in the news business. Do you believe a word I say? With more and more people getting their news online, are they able to tell the difference between fact and fiction? And in the social media age, does anyone care? I'm Martin Stanford. This is Insight. Welcome to Insight. Fake news is nothing new. Propaganda, hoaxes and made-up stories have always found their way into the public domain. But with more of us getting our daily news from the internet, these false news stories can reach more people more quickly via social media than old-fashioned marketing or viral emails ever could. The phenomenon has led to Facebook and Google to announce that they will crack down on fake news sites and restrict their ability to make money from advertising revenue. Insight's Tig Enright explains more.
The people of America and the rest of us are trying to recover from one of the rowdiest and rudest elections ever.
I don't know what I said. I don't remember.
You could put half of Trump supporters into what I call the basket of deplorables. The racist, sexist, homophobic, Islamophobic, you name it.
More and more of us are getting our news from social media, particularly Facebook, where the kind of stories we're shown and encouraged to read are decided by preferences we've already expressed. Often these stories are biased, but in some instances, they're pure fiction.
As long as it's on Facebook and people can see it, as long as it's on social media, people start believing it. And it creates this dust cloud of nonsense.
Throughout this election, alongside the usual big names in journalism, social media feeds have been filled with stories from lesser-known news sources. For example, the Denver Guardian reported that an FBI agent suspected in Hillary's email leaks was found dead in an apparent murder-suicide. It's incredible stuff, but while the Denver Guardian might sound like an established newspaper, it was left to the Denver Post to point out that it's just a website that launched in July, and this was the only thing it had ever published.
The address listed for the Denver Guardian newsroom points to a tree in a parking lot on Colfax. On top of that, there is
At the peak of its popularity, this fake story was being shared at a rate of 100 times a minute by eager readers. Long-established news brands have found themselves listed alongside fake news sources in social media feeds. Equal positioning translates as equal credibility in the eyes of some readers.
Go back hundreds of years to sort of pamphleteer culture and that kind of thing, but since then, since the dominance of mainstream media outlets became quite established in the last century, it hasn't been very easy to just disseminate false information as you want with no real obstruction. It is now easy to do that, it's easy to spread it very fast, and I think we're only really just beginning to understand the implications of that and just to start thinking about how to tackle it.
Research carried out by the online news service BuzzFeed says that many of the fake articles written for the recent US election were made in Macedonia, where in the city of Velez an industry has sprung up, creating sensational, click-worthy stories and generating advertising dollars.
You can see all the stories people are talking about right now and now and now.
Before the election, Facebook was criticised for having staff manage which articles were trending, a practice it subsequently abandoned. Now, after the election, Facebook is in the spotlight again for allowing a fake news free-for-all. Founder Mark Zuckerberg responded,
"We've been working on this problem for a long time and we take the responsibility seriously. We need to be careful not to discourage sharing of opinions or to mistakenly restrict accurate content. We do not want to be the arbiters of truth ourselves, but instead rely on the community and trusted third parties."
Facebook says it doesn't want to judge the truth, but in China, where the social network is forbidden, it will neither confirm nor deny reports that it's working on a version of its service that will comply with internet censors.
Well, in the offline space, we completely accept that freedom of speech is compatible with regulation of that speech within certain limits. And particularly if we look at the example of television, in many jurisdictions that's heavily regulated. The principle behind that was that TV, radio is beamed into people's homes. They don't necessarily choose what they get to see or hear about it. In the same way now, online news is beamed into people's homes. It comes up on their tablets and their phones, and they don't choose when they see it. So the principle is the same. The idea that it should be regulated, that there should be even potentially controls on partisanship or some of the content is not a crazy thing.
Facebook also says it will cut off ad revenue to fake news publishers, and soon it will encourage its users to report the items that they believe to be false.
Well, that's the same solution that Facebook already has for things that might be obscene or an incitement to violence. It relies on users to report bad things after they've been published.
Every day, ordinary people must separate fact from fiction. But if information is your business, shouldn't it be your job to make sure it's right? Ty Genwright, reporting for Insight.
Well, to discuss that further, I'm joined by Dr. Andrew Calcutt, who's the Principal Lecturer in Journalism at the University of East London. And also with us is Professor George Brock, who's a Professor of Journalism at City University, also in London. Andrew Calcutt, how damaging do you think this new phenomenon of fake news to be?
I don't think it's new. I think you can go back to the founding documents of modern journalism and you'll find Joseph Addison making stuff up in their first edition of The Spectator. But he credited his readers with being the intelligence to work it out for themselves. I think what's going on here is another instance of the political establishment wanting to have cake and eat it at the same time. Because just a couple of weeks ago, in the first trauma of Trump, we were told that the plebs have gone post-truth and they vote now simply according to emotions and appetites and nothing to do with the facts at all. That was 10 days ago. Now, the new version is they are interested in facts, but unfortunately they've been taken in by the wrong ones, by the teenagers from Macedonia. I think these are just excuses for the fact that the political establishment and the mainstream media along with them have lost touch with where the people are, and they're fumbling around looking for spurious excuses which are more of a problem than the fake news.
Okay, a lot to talk about there. George Brock, do you think we've lost discernment? We cannot tell the difference anymore?
No, I think people are very seriously interested in trying to determine the truth of things and make a systematic attempt to do it. If you go back, for example, to the crisis over the Crimea, when somebody, probably backed by the Russians, shot down an airliner, everybody's interest in discovering what had happened was intense, and it's continued more than a year, actually. So I think there are things people are curious about. What we have to, Andrew is quite right to say, people have always tried to tell lies or spin the news and so on. That's not new. What's different, however, is that you can do it on an industrial capacity nowadays online. And online doesn't just, it moves things between people, so it reroutes information, if you like. Previously, journalism and public information went through a small number of people. Now, you can say that's oligarchic, it's bad, you can have any opinion about it you like, but that was how it worked, because that was how the technology did it.
You had to be qualified to a degree, didn't you?
You had to be qualified to a degree, but also what happened was that societies decided that it was quite a good idea if what they were doing was reliable. There wasn't a law about that. It's not illegal in any of these societies to tell people something that isn't true unless you actually defame somebody's reputation, which is different. But what you can do now with Facebook is distribute it to a very, very large number of people very, very quickly.
And a very large number of people can challenge it. That's the point.
Absolutely. And one of the things that is happening, and it's quite evident, is that people who want to say that's wrong, that's wrong, that's wrong, can do so equally fast to an equally large audience.
Yeah.
So we don't know how much effect that had on an election.
But arguably the damage has been done or the opinion made. If we step back from the current phenomenon of the social media volume there, do we take it back to the internet age of the blogger, do you think, Andrew, where we started there? Anyone could be a blogger. Well, you didn't have to have any kind of moral code, you didn't have to have any kind of ethical training, you could just write down what you thought.
I do indeed remember the first TV show I ever saw about the internet when some of us were involved in trying to initiate news gathering on that medium. I remember Ian Hislop saying the trouble is there's no gatekeeper, so it's at least as old as that. But actually I don't think that this is where the problem lies. The people who've been messing around with the truth and playing games with it for far too long are in fact the kind of professional middle classes who are now really upset that the plebs are doing it to them.
Who amongst the professional middle class?
Well, for instance, the academics who in the 80s talked up postmodernism and redefined truth as not single truth that you aim to capture, but plural, relativist, personalized truths. And so they started messing around with a big capital P for postmodernism. Meanwhile, lots of journalists said, oh yeah, well, we daren't do big truth anymore. We'll do pragmatic truth, which is what works, and we'll try to balance up one person's truth against another's. And subsequently to that, a whole generation of creatives built their careers on inventing a system of a magical system of mythical thinking called the brand, and if that's not making stuff up, I don't know what is. And you look at the financial economy, which is entirely dependent on what people choose to believe for as long as they can bring themselves to believe it. What has got people's goat is now the plebs are playing the same ironic game. They're saying, in voting for somebody like Trump, they're saying, we'd rather vote for the monkey than be made a monkey of by you lot anymore. And that's what the political establishment don't like.
That there's been some kind of middle-class conspiracy to lie to the proletariat, the masses, over generations?
If there was a middle-class conspiracy, I fear I may have been part of it. I disagree with Andrew mostly. I mean, that people have always, perfectly true, that people have always tried to spin, slant the truth. That doesn't just include occasionally badly behaving journalists, it includes the marketing and advertising industries and a whole lot of other people too. The thing that has fundamentally changed here is people's ability to publish. The ability to publish once upon a time for just purely technological, hard fact reasons was very difficult to do. It was very expensive business to get into. Now it's not expensive, it's extremely easy. Everyone can be their own publisher. What that means is that journalism sits in a mass of information, a torrent of information that is reaching people. And journalists have been very slow to say, okay, we have to live with this new world, we can't change it, we can't reverse it, but we have to signal that we have a particular task here, which is we attempt to tell, let's not put it higher than attempt to tell as best we can what is true and tell truth from falsehood.
Yeah.
Not a bad idea.
Okay. I think it's a great idea. I would say let's put it high. You know, let's make a big thing out of it. Let's call it a vocation. Let's see people unashamedly dedicating their lives to the truth rather than talking it down and saying, well, journalism in the last decade has pretty much written the longest suicide note in history. You remember when, not that many years ago, people want to say at professional conferences, there's always someone who knows more about the story than we do. If that's not writing professional truth-seeking out of the picture, I don't know what is.
All right.
So we've got to get on it.
We've got to pause in our conversation. Andrew Calcutt and George Brooke, thank you for the moment. This is Insight. Coming next, living in an echo chamber, where you choose the news you hear and see and read.